Tell me when we're on. I won't
You're
know.
on.
What? We're on? Well, hi there. It's good to be with you. I had a little technical glitch this morning, but looks like we in ran around it. Can in ran or in run? Anyway, we're glad to be with you this morning. Pancho got me on here. Did we make it on time? Well, we're a minute or two late, but we're looking forward to talking with you. This is Prove All Things, and we're going to talk today. We're in Luke 16, by the way, and we're going to talk today about the unjust steward, which I have a beautiful picture of here that Pancho was going to wake up and put on here. There it is. He did it. This is the unjust steward that we're going to talk about today, as I say, in Luke 16. And we're looking forward to talking with you. This, if you'll go back to that thing he was on before, I'll do a few adjustments and we'll go from there. This is Prove All Things. We're in Luke 16. My name's John Welch. This program is brought to you by the High School Road Church of Christ in Indianapolis, Indiana, 3103 North High School Road. And we would love to have you join us as often as you can. Today's our class. You can join us in this class. And I don't tell you this often enough. A lot of you who are longtime listeners have, since we had that glitch, I don't know exactly where to look, but I'm going to figure it out. I don't say it often enough. This is how you can reach us. We're at, you can find us on chat, which, Pancho, if you'd set me up on chat, we'll go from there. And you can also reach us by telephone at 257-3000. That's a local area code of 317. And you can reach us if you're out of the area code at 1-800-423-2484. You can email us, proveallthings @comcast.net. We had, before we go into Luke 16, which I believe it or not going to head to in a minute, we had a comment last Tuesday that came in on chat, apparently right at the tail end of the program, because I was trying to follow it and I didn't see this. But Anessa says we were studying about in Luke 15 about the lost sheep, coin, and boy, and she says it's interesting to see those three parables, that the love of God can defeat any cause of losing the way to Jesus. That really helps me. Thank you, and I appreciate that, Anessa. It's nice to know there's people out there listening to us or watching us. But anyway, let's start reading. Let's go to Luke 16 right now and start our study there. He said also unto the disciples, there was a certain rich man which had a steward, and the same was accused unto him that he was wasting his goods. And he called him and said unto him, what is this that I hear of thee? Render the account of thy stewardship, for thou canst no longer be steward. And the steward said within himself, what shall I do? Seeing that my Lord taketh away the stewardship from me, I have not strength to dig, to beg, I am ashamed. I'm resolved what to do, that when I'm put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. And calling to him each one of his Lord's debtors, he said to the first, how much owest thou, my Lord? He said, 100 measures of oil. He said unto him, take thy bond, and sit down quickly and write 50. Then said he to another, how much owest thou? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. He saith unto him, take thy bond and write 80. His Lord commended the unrighteous steward because he had done wisely. But the sons of this world are for their own generation wiser than the sons of light. I say unto you, make to yourselves friends by means of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when it shall fail, Sound is a good thing.
Now you have sound.
Okay. Pancho said we lost sound there for a minute. And so we hope we're back on. We're back. Okay, I hope you were reading along there. That's where we did. Let's think about this just a little bit. Someone pointed out that money is merely a medium of exchange for a man's life. Now, this particular parable, of course, follows those other three, and he's still talking to the same group. And so apparently he had gigged the Pharisees pretty hard in those first three because they didn't care anything at all about folks that were lost. Now he begins to talk to them about their money. So money is merely a medium of exchange. And so we spend our time and our talent and our energy at a job and receive in exchange some mediums, usually money. By spending that money, a man exchanges his life thus for whatever he considers worthy of his life. If a man hoards his money and spends it all indulging himself, it manifests a selfish, uncaring sort of heart. And that's, I think, what he's getting at here. This is one of those so interesting parables because it combines two elements of Jesus that we rarely like to admit. First of all, it's a negative parable. And the Lord is not necessarily saying, here, this is how to be in terms of the injustice and unrighteousness and the blackmail and the stealing and cheating of the unrighteous steward. It's a negative parable. But at the same time, to me, it indicates something of the humor of Jesus. You know, sometimes if you can't reach people just by telling them the flat out truth, you have to teach them with humor so that they can maybe, just maybe, see the humor and ridiculousness of a particular situation. And as I said, we are sort of cobbled together today, and so if I don't look at you directly, I ask your forgiveness. We're kind of scrambling around here, doing a few things so we can get off. Now, this is a parable. Of course, he's spoken to his disciples, but it was primarily for the benefit of the Pharisees. We see that later on, who were lovers of money. As I say, the other three parables had pretty well seen them, but the two stories, I'm not sure they're both parables, but the two stories in Luke 16 are aimed also at the Pharisees. This is the first one aimed at their love of money. The second one's aimed at their love of money too, and it begins to irritate, begins to show them how to use your money. You can use your money to get to heaven. That's one of his first points in this first parable. You can use your money and your diligence, your smarts, and your time and effort to get to heaven. Or in the second story, which is the account of the rich man and Lazarus, you can learn how to use your money to go to hell. So you have the Lord's giving those choices here. And this first one, as I say, is an example of the Lord's humor, I think. He presents to us a scoundrel, and we all love to see and make fun of scoundrels every now and then. And it is significant that the Lord made your money, how you deal with your money, an everyday matter, how you deal with your money as part of the citizenship in the kingdom of God. The rich man was the word from which we get the word plutocrat. He was a rich man. The master of this house was a rich man. And he had a steward, which means refers to a house ruler, a manager, sort of the governor of his affairs, if you will. And he had been squandering some of the Lord's money, dipping in the till, if you will, and is apparently accused by someone. That's what it says. He's accused by someone, maybe another servant in the household, somebody who was jealous or whatever it was. He's accused. And the master calls the accused man before him, demands an accounting for the money. And the steward's guilty. He was, you see him guilty of a lot of things in this account. He was guilty of extravagance. He was wasteful. He was lazy. He says he wouldn't dig. He says, I don't want to dig. He was proud. He wouldn't beg. He was dishonest in that he cheated his master on perhaps several different scores. But he has the opportunity. So he says, render the account of thy stewardship, for thou canst no longer be steward. Well, he devised a scheme to sort of try to satisfy both of the things pushing at him. This should be obvious to you. But he has his master's creditors who weren't going to get their money, or at least, owed a bill. His master's debtors, they owed a bill for, in one case, oil, in another case, wheat. And he tells them to reduce those bills, to rewrite the bill at a reduced amount. Well, this accomplished two things for him. Number one, it made him look like he was collecting all the bills. Big influence of money. Things looked good. On the other hand, he had blackmail grounds for the master's debtors, because he knew and they knew, and he could prove that he had reduced the amount of money. So if he got fired, let go, dismissed by his current master, he could go to one of these guys and say, look, I saved you a bushel of money, and you need to hire me, or I'm going to tell everybody what I did, and then you'll be up the creek for cheating my master and for a lot of money that you really still owe him. So, and to his own master, he looked like, oh my, he's collected the bills, because he rewrote the bills. And to the creditor, to the debtors, he looked like he would have had blackmail rights over them, and so he would provide for his future. That's what he says. What shall I do? Seeing that my Lord taketh away the stewardship from me. He knew what the other servants in the house did. He says, I don't have strength to dig. And he says, I'm ashamed to beg. He was proud. And so here's what he was going to do. The important thing is to realize that a steward was an employee, basically. Sometimes he was a slave, but he oftentimes became sort of like one of the family. For instance, in Genesis, the 15th chapter, Abraham opines that he doesn't have an heir except Eliezer of Damascus, who was apparently his steward, one of the people in his household. And it was his job to use his master's goods for the benefit of his master. And he was always to be held accountable. Now, Jesus isn't condoning, of course. I shouldn't have to tell you this, but I'll state the obvious. Jesus isn't condoning dishonesty. What he's holding up as an example is the steward's wisdom, sagacity in this situation that needs to be copied. For instance, in verse 8, the Lord commended the unrighteous steward because he had done wisely. Now, what he's saying that this guy had some character traits that are worth imitating, and there are, in the worst of men, some character traits that are worth imitating, and wise people will see them and copy them. God didn't condone the faults of Abraham, but he held him up as the father of the faithful. Jesus wanted his followers to be honest and prudent, and I hated that. just hated that all over the place. David, that's not the only area where we're having troubles today. Let me see if I can revise here. You're all right. You can't help me with this one. But we're going to get there and we'll be all right eventually. And I'll understand computers more in the future sometime. Let's see. Here we go. I'm sort of back to where I was without my good notes. You read a lot of commentaries. They get hung up in some of the details of this. Why he reduced one payment for 50%, why he reduced another 20%. I think those are sort of the unnecessary details of the narrative, or they're necessary to the narrative, but they're not necessarily narratives, elements of the parable that the Lord intended us to interpret. Okay, I'm getting back to where I was. Boy, I just hate that all over the place. Just hang with me here and I'll get back to my ideas that I wanted to convey for you. Here we go. He was talking about the way this guy conducted his business. There's a lot of things about this man that the Lord wanted us to see and wanted us to emulate. He was implying that this man was far-sighted and fairly smart, astute in what he was doing, in that he was providing for his future. He's not holding him up as an excellent example of a believer. He certainly wasn't that. He's simply saying that worldly people are often far-sighted and fairly wise in taking care of themselves. And so that the Lord desires a sense of forethought and preparation and wisdom for our spiritual ends, not just our material ends, so that the steward was wiser than most church members. He calls them sons of light in this passage. There's a great deal of a lack of common sense on the part of a lot of Christians. They don't have any sense of self-discipline. They don't have any sense of sacrifice necessary to attain the spiritual goals that the Lord set for us. This man, even in his material goals, had self-discipline and sacrifice. He suddenly sobered up and took care of himself financially. Well, the Lord's not praising his bad goals, but he's telling us that we could follow this. We could be diligent in the same sort of sense. It's sort of like a bolt of lightning and thunder getting us from being spiritually asleep. He's not going to let us get by with stupidity as Christians. He expects us to invest everything, to invest ourselves, and to be diligent in serving him. Two or three other things that are interesting in this. First of all, it's interesting to note the division of humanity. The Lord, there's only two divisions. If you notice that in the scriptures, there's only two divisions: the sons of this world and the sons of light. Two classes in the Bible. There are believers and unbelievers. There's the obedient and the disobedient. There's gatherers and scatterers. He says, in another place he says, whosoever doesn't gather with me scatters abroad. There's only two choices. There's the saved and the lost, the wise and the foolish. Now, you and I, when we make categories of people, we've got a whole list of folks, good and bad, up and down, Some people, well, he's a pretty good guy. He's really good. He's sort of, the Lord didn't do that. There are only two categories here. And when you come down to the final test, the Lord's going to remember that. There's only two categories. Either you're going to have allegiance to him or to the devil. He says later on, you can't serve mammon. You can't serve God and mammon. You're going to have to pick one. There's only two roads, the broad way and the narrow way. He keeps telling us this, and we're sort of asleep. The sons of this world, the steward was not wiser in terms of what he chose. What he chose was temporal. It was this worldly. So he's not praising him for that. And everything that he chose was doomed eventually to destruction. Every dollar, every moment, every work of art, all of that's going to perish. And so he was choosing those things. The things that a lot of us work for. And I see that in a lot of people. We work for stuff. I'm sitting here in the middle of a big office that I've created for myself, surrounded by I'm thinking of that movie, Bob, that's got that goblin that carries around the ring of power, and it's his precious. I'm surrounded by 1,000 precious things. That the Lord doesn't want that. He's not going to have that. Things have to be exchanged for a sort of different sort of currency. For instance, look with me in 1 Thessalonians 2 and verse 19. He says, what is our hope or joy or crown of glorying? Are not even ye before our Lord Jesus at his coming? For you are our glory and our joy. We've got to exchange the things that we're working for in life for people. The things of this world are vain. The Lord wants us to exchange it for something more important. Here we go. Hey, yes, good, yay. That must be the voice coming back on. And somebody asked, is the word Lord in verse 8 meaning our Lord or the Lord of the unjust steward? That I believe, his Lord, it says his Lord in Luke 16:8. His Lord commended the unjust steward because he'd done righteously. That's what I was trying to tell you. The plot that he came up with made him look good to his master because it looked like he was collecting all the bills. A lot of income here. And secondly, it gave him blackmail stuff for everybody else. He rewrote the bills. If you've got if you're working for a boss who's beginning to fuss at you because you're squandering his money and you're not collecting the bills and there's not enough income here, something's wrong, and you go out and you rewrite everything. You're the boss, sort of the boss. You're the underboss, and you rewrite everything. Some debtor owes you $1 million, and you rewrite it for $800,000. Well, it looks to your boss like, hey, we got suddenly $800,000 worth of income, and George is collecting the bills. You look good. His Lord commended him. But I don't think he knew that he lost $200,000 there. And on the second half of it, if the boss does find out what you're up to, you can go to the people you saved $200,000 and blackmail them. So you have this, it was sort of a double-edged sword in this particular regard. But Jesus down here, this is Jesus talking in verse 9. I say unto you, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness. This is, I think, humor on the Lord's part, that when it shall fail, they may receive you into eternal tabernacles. I believe that's a sarcastic, humorous, maybe if you don't like the word sarcasm, call it humor, a sarcastic remark to these people. And okay. If you could take care of that, please, Pancho, we'll forge right ahead. the Lord is commending the unjust steward for how he conducted business. He didn't lie to himself. He faced the facts. He didn't fantasize. He didn't hide his head in the sand like an ostrich. And business people, one of their characteristics is they know how to be rather brutally honest with themselves about their profit and loss ledgers. They don't lie to themselves about whether the business is good or bad. They learn to be realists. And Christians are way too prone to create a sort of fool's paradise for themselves. They forget the one thing that is in their charge and go around in a sort of a fantasy that they can give 10% to the Lord and he'll be happy, and that the other 90% is all theirs. The steward of this parable had forgotten that the things that he was dealing with were his master's. So here's another one comes. So our Lord did not commend the unjust steward. He just was stating the fact that the steward's master was commending him. Some translations make it appear that Jesus was commending him. I think Jesus was commending certain aspects of the unjust steward. I think he was doing it humorously, but I appreciate it. I don't believe verse 8 that you ask about is doing that. Let me see. I've been looking at the American Standard. Let me switch versions and see what you're saying. Yeah, verse 8 in the King James makes it look as if the Lord is commending him, but I believe the American Standard makes it look as if his own master had done it. I see your point. But you certainly have in verse 9 the Lord commending him, at least in certain aspects of what he was doing. He was very smart in what he did. He didn't run away with his master's money. He didn't stash it away like the farmer, the foolish farmer in Luke 12. He didn't throw up his hands in despair and mental paralysis, which afflicts me every now and then. This morning's been sort of like that in my life. So many things hit you at once that you sort of throw up your hands and run. And he dealt with the situation. He dealt with it dishonestly, but he dealt with it. And so the Lord is talking to Christians and daring them to believe what Jesus says to them. In Matthew 25 and verse 40, he says, "Inasmuch as ye have done it to the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me," as he speaks about our money and dealing with our money. He made the steward went straight for his goal. And it's a sort of a undeniable axiom of the business world that a man who can be trusted with a little can be trusted with a lot. He can be promoted. We see that. You don't come into General Motors as the president and CEO of General Motors. You come in maybe sweeping the floors. And then when they say, hey, he works diligently at what he's doing, then you gradually move him up to more responsible positions. That's what the Lord's saying. He's saying here, he that is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. As I mentioned earlier, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it unto me. He that is unrighteous in a little, the man who will cheat you for $1 will cheat you for a bigger chunk if he just gets his hand. What in the world would make you think that he's going to be honest with more money when he's going to cheat you with a little? And then he closes out in verse 13, no servant can serve two masters. And that was sort of what this guy was doing. Either he'll hate the one and love the other, or else he'll hold the one and despise the other. you cannot serve God and mammon. That's what this parable's been about. This parable's been about how you approach your money. Are you going to use it to feather your own nest, or are you going to use it in the service of God? He says that the sarcastic, ironic sort of statement up there in verse 9, make to yourselves friends by means of the mammon of unrighteousness, then when it shall fail, they may receive it. They may receive you in eternal habitations. That's an ironic sort of statement. They won't receive you, though we all know that. You won't prepare yourself for the future. And I don't have enough time to explain this. Pancho told me to hurry up. He's got things to do, and maybe you do too. We appreciate you for joining us today. We'll be back next Tuesday. We'll be back on the Lord's Day, of course, at our regular services, 3103 North High School Road, the High School Road Church of Christ here in Indianapolis. You can still reach us at 257-3000. You can still reach us at 1-800-423-2484. And we'll get Pancho to get to work on this so that I know where to look and know what to do and all these things. It has been good to be with you. If the Lord wills, we'll be back again. Thanks for being involved today. Good day to you.